Okay, for those of you joining us on the recorded video, welcome to week 16 Montana Government Studies Seminar. We're going to get underway here. I don't think I have any video clips. Hit that button. Do that, maybe. All right. Alrighty, so your announcements. Remember that your Unit 4 reading guide is due on Friday. This will be the last thing that you have that will have a full 5-day grace period on it. So I guess enjoy that, but as I say every time, don't wait till the last minute. Really and truly, we're down to crunch time, and I'm trying to pack up my space here at the Remote Learning Center because I'm going back to CMR next year. And I have to have everything packed by the last day of school so that they can move all my boxes. Oh, it started snowing again. So yeah, don't wait till the last minute. The sooner you get stuff in, the sooner I can get it into the grade book, the sooner that everything gets done. Some of you need every point you can get right now, so do the Unit 4 reading guide. Get it done. Don't leave questions blank either. If you have a question, contact me. I'm happy to help you answer them. But if you don't tell me there's a problem, then I don't know, and I just assume you've been lazy. Unit 5 test will go live next Monday. I discovered the other day that I actually haven't written this yet. I realized that the last time I taught this was the first time I taught this class, and by the time we got to this point, we were out of time, and so I didn't do a Unit 4 test. That should say Unit 4. I think I had the U.S. history on the brain that doing Unit 5. But in any case, so there will be a test. I think it will be a very short test. It will not be as long as the typical tests. But bear in mind that's due Friday, and your grace period ends 8 a.m. the day after Memorial Day. And even that, I mean, that's pushing it for me to be able to get that in the grade book. But I'm willing to give you that amount of extra time, but it will not be a full 5-day grace period as you are used to. So don't make, I'll do it next Wednesday. No, that would be bad. You will not be able to turn that in at that point. Now, what we do have, and what I do actually have written, is a final exam. I'm still editing. I may pare a couple of questions off of it. But at this moment, the final exam, as I have it written, is 83 questions, but there's no written response questions at all. It's all multiple choice and matching. There will be no grace period on this at all. In fact, you won't even have a full 5 days on it. It's going to go live. At this point, I'm setting it to go live Tuesday morning, basically like 12:01 a.m. I may set it to go live on Memorial Day, on that Monday. I'll let you know next week. But at this moment, it's set to go live on Tuesday. I will not be, quote unquote, proctoring that exam as I did with semester 1, which only one person in here was with me for any other class first semester. But I had everybody log on to Zoom and keep their cameras on while they took the test. And I turned my camera off and watched people take the test. And I did that because it was the district assessment. Well, I'm not giving the district assessment. I have written my own test, and if I ever get to use it, it'll be this year. So yeah, that's how we're going to do that. Basic general test rules apply. There will be a set window of time when you can take that. You'll have 90 minutes within that Tuesday through Thursday at 8 p.m. time period. Remember that Moodle does not like to pause your attempt. to let you like leave and go eat dinner and then come back. So make sure finals week especially be making a plan to take that test in one sitting. I don't think it's going to take anybody 90 minutes, really. I will say that this includes multiple choice matching. There's no written response. Some of the questions are map ID questions, so you may want to go back and take a look at the map project that you created. Hello? Question? Saw somebody had unmuted. So you may want to take a look at that. Now, I'm not going to ask you really obscure map, IDs. It's not going to be like, where is Ekalaka and stuff like that. No, it's going to be the major Montana cities plus, and I included 3 other ones that I consider major minors. Anaconda, Havre, and Miles City. So those are the 3 sort of additional ones beyond, Kalispell, Great Falls, etc. So those 3, Anaconda, Havre, Miles City, you need to know where they are. And there's only a couple of them that are like remote, like Butte and Anaconda. That one might be tricky for you just because they're like right next to each other. But all the rest of them, if you have a general knowledge of Montana geography, you'll get it. But you also need to know what county each one of these is in. You're not going to have to come up with it out of the blue sky. There will be a list, and you'll need to select, Bozeman is in Gallatin County, for example. Okay, so it's a matching sort of thing. So it's not like a fill in the blank, but you'll want to brush up on that just to be sure you got it. You'll also want to know the location of the state's Indian reservations, which I'll show you a map during today's session. And you can find that map in any number of places. And then, so you'll want to know the locations of those, and also where the Little Shell is basically headquartered. They don't have a reservation, and this one should be easy, it's Great Falls. Okay, so this shouldn't be hugely difficult for you. But yeah, so all of that is on the test, and then the rest of the questions are based upon our units of study. And I will post a review sheet next week that has sort of the breakdown of the general topics of the questions. So you can, if you want to make yourself a little page of notes, or, a couple pages of notes that you can refer to during the test, you're welcome to do that. That's what when I teach classes face to face, that's typically what I allow. If it's not a district assessment, they get a page of notes. So if you want to make yourself that, rather than trying to, feverishly hunt through the book for things, because then you will run out of time. But if you have it sort of prepped on a page or a couple of pages, then you'd probably be better off. And honestly, by that point, if you've done that work, you probably won't even need them. They'll probably be automatic to you for 75% of the questions. Next week will be our last seminar sessions, so we will not have live seminar sessions during the week of finals. I will be available on Zoom for office hours that week, and if there's another time that you want to get together, most likely I'll be able to make that work. This week is our last discussion forum, so make sure you do that. Again, some of you need every stinking point you can get your hands on. And then last but not least, please join the Remind. Again, we only have a couple weeks left. And by the by, when the semester ends, I will just go ahead and archive that class. So you will not get any further announcements from me beyond about the Monday after the semester ends if I maybe have to send something out that day. But typically, once Friday hits, you'll never get another message from me. So, all right. Any questions on that? Going once, going twice. All right. Do that every time. All right. So we're talking tribal government today, and this is definitely a fast and dirty discussion. And what I want to emphasize is that every tribe is different when it comes to basically all of this. Okay, so we're going to be talking incredibly generally, and I would encourage you to read the part about tribal government in the course that's posted that will give you some more sort of specific examples. Um, this is going to be incredibly general just to get you that exposure. But I mean, this is the fact that there aren't a lot of hard and fast rules on this stuff is very typical. I mean, even like legal experts, when they're called upon to talk about tribal legal systems and things like that, they're like, well, one of them's like this, another one's like this. I mean, there is not a lot of similarities always. So we're going to kind of talk about the high points. If this kind of stuff interests you, I would encourage you, when you invariably take some college courses, to do something, whether you go to full college or go to a community college for a trade or something like that. You'll probably have to take a history class or a government class or something like that. Maybe take a class in this stuff. All right, so in terms of sort of what tribes are to the U.S. government, we're talking about the phrase that appears most often is nations within a nation. So one of the important concepts of this is sovereignty. These tribes, which are also sometimes referred to as nations, like the Cherokee Nation, for example, the Blackfeet Nation, they're also sometimes called peoples. So the Cree people, or whatever. So variously they're referred to as various things. But one of the really important things is this notion of sovereignty. Sovereignty is the idea that you have the ability to basically make your own decisions from a legal standpoint. So, for example, when y'all turn 18, you are, with one glaring exception, sovereign. You no longer get special treatment. So, let's say you're arrested, you are not treated as a juvenile anymore. You are tried as an adult. You are an adult once you hit 18. So the day before your birthday, you're still considered a juvenile. The day after your birthday, you're considered an adult, and you can make your own decisions. Essentially, it seems like a very arbitrary line, but so in terms of tribal sovereignty, what this means is that the tribes are their own thing, and they can make their own decisions. The U.S. federal government recognizes just south of 600 tribal governments across the United States. These bodies can have their own laws. They are not typically bound by state laws unless they agree to be bound by state laws. And there have been situations where state governments attempt to enforce their law on tribal grounds, and sometimes they are successful in doing that, and sometimes they are not. It's very much a case by case basis. Now, Congress, the national government, can make laws that govern tribes and members of tribes. And that is because even though tribes are sovereign and tribes are their own individual nations, they are also what are known as domestic dependent nations, meaning they are entirely within the borders of the United States. So yeah, they're sovereign, they can make their own decisions, but if Congress really wants to press something, they pretty much can, because at the end of the day, these nations are within the borders of the United States. So sovereignty is not necessarily absolute in every circumstance. But these tribes largely govern themselves. That being said, there is, depending upon the reservation and on the tribe, there is some collaboration between tribes and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which sort of manages reservations for the federal government, and they have law enforcement capabilities as well, which is why there are a number of crimes that, if committed on various reservations, end up in federal court. They don't typically end up in state courts. They end up in federal courts if they happen on a reservation. Oh, wow, really coming down out there now. So tribes have, in one form or another, a written document that functions as a constitution. Some of those constitutions look very similar to the Constitution of the United States of America. Some of them are somewhat different. But all a constitution is basically a framework for what the government's going to look like and how it's going to function. Some of them are more flushed out than others. But typically, the tribes do have, just as a functional thing, three branches of government, just like the US Constitution. Now, in some tribes, those branches are grown together. So, just as a reminder, the three branches: executive, legislative, judicial. So, in some tribes, that executive is a chief. In some tribes, that person is referred to as a governor, or a tribal chairperson, or even, for some tribes, a tribal president. Um, some tribes have tribal legislatures. Most have what's known as a tribal council. That is their legislative branch. Now, very commonly, the executive, the chief, the chair, the president, the governor, is also a part of that tribal council. So the executive and the legislative branches in a lot of tribes, including most of the ones here in Montana, are kind of together that way. They've sort of come together. And oftentimes the tribal council elects the chief. So that's not like a popular election. Not that the U.S. president is chosen popularly, technically, but the tribal council oftentimes elects amongst their own members the chief for a certain period of time. And then some tribes do have a separate court system, and sometimes those court systems can have multiple layers. There are tribes that have their own supreme courts, and then there are tribes that the tribal council also functions as a tribal court in certain circumstances. And in some tribal situations, they really don't have a lowest level tribal court that is sort of punted either to federal jurisdiction, or they have agreements to operate within state courts. Again, different depending upon each tribe, depending upon the state. There's a little under 600 tribes in the United States. There are no two that are exactly alike in this way. And so, as it says, there are some tribes that have a simpler structure where basically everything runs through a tribal council. So basically, those three branches of government are three branches that are entwined around each other, and they're basically the same thing, but they have three different functions. They just all done by the same body. And typically, these governments have some elected form. So typically, the tribal council is elected. Perhaps the chief is elected only by the tribal council and not by, the tribal members as a whole. But elections do happen. I don't believe there's any tribe in the United States that's like a monarchy type principle. But who knows? I'm not an expert in this. There aren't a lot of experts in this. Okay, so what do tribal governments do? They provide services to their community. They set laws for people on, if they have a reservation, on the reservation to follow. Um, and they also have to secure revenue to pay for the services that the tribes provide. Now, a couple of you out there might be going, but wait a minute, I thought everything on the reservations was paid for by the federal government. No, that is highly dependent upon the agreement that the tribes signed, the treaty, if it happened before 1871, the treaty that they signed with the federal government. Some of those treaties have responsibilities that the federal government has to pay for certain things. But that is not everything that a tribe does. So one tribe might have access to federally funded healthcare clinics. Another tribe might have access to federally funded schools. But all of these reservations require those services as a whole. And the treaty, as signed in 1871, may not have addressed every need that is now facing this population. And so these tribal governments have to step in to figure out how to provide these services and also how to pay for them. So things like education, social programs, emergency response. These reservations tend to have EMS and local law enforcement and things like that. Fire departments. Fire departments cost money, if you didn't know. Management of energy and land, workforce development, keeping infrastructure nice. Um, so paving highways and keeping up telephone lines and things like that. Nowadays, internet is part of that. And keeping buildings functioning and standing. And all of this, the federal government only provides a certain amount of money, again, depending upon the treaty. So the tribe has to come up with how to pay for the rest of this. And so that means they have to have some sort of economic development engine going on. For some tribes, that's to be, sort of stereotypical about it, gaming and casinos. We don't have a ton of that here in Montana, but we do have one or two. For some of them, that's tourism. For some tribes, that's mining and extraction. For some, that's agriculture. So it really just it depends on what areas the reservation has and the tribe has under their control, and what resources are there that they can work with to make money for their tribe. This also includes taxation, just like any other government. Tribes often impose sales taxes or property taxes or any number of other taxes that people would need to pay, whether they are visiting the reservation, just passing through, or whether they live there. So that is another way that tribes can make money, is essentially tax their members and tax visitors. So again, treaties from 1778 to about 1871, the federal government negotiated individual treaties with these Native American tribes, these nations. And treaties have very much a force of law to them. Now, this did not mean that the federal government didn't. No, sir. Okay, I'm not sure what you're referring to there, George, but um, Yeah, so these do have a force of law to them where now this did not mean that the federal government did not feel free to basically amend these on the back of a cocktail napkin. But from a legal standpoint, these are enforceable just like a treaty between, say, the United States and Great Britain. In fact, these have more weight to them than laws passed by Congress. It was when you asked if anyone had. Oh, okay, good man. Um, so yeah, so this is actually in the sort of hierarchy of laws. This is above just something passed by Congress and signed by the president. These are actually more important. Um, So since 1871, any further agreements between the tribes between the US government and tribes have not been treaties. They have been agreements, again, passed by Congress and adopted by the tribe, but they are not called treaties. And so in the hierarchy of laws, they fall below treaties in the Constitution. They're down below that. Um, so these agreements, these treaties, the tribes agree to give up major parts of their land, and the United States government agrees to provide services and assistance into perpetuity. Some people say, "Oh, well, why don't these tribes learn to stand on their own 2 feet, by gum?" Well, because the treaty says that for all time, or for the length of the treaty, that the US government will provide this, and this specifically. Okay, so it's not like tomorrow the federal government can go, "Oh, well, we're done. No more money for the tribes," because they would be in violation of a treaty, which is like being in violation of the Constitution. It's not okay. So some of the things that these include peace and protection. So the tribes agree not to make war against the United States. The United States agrees to protect the tribe. Let's say Canada comes down and invades the Blackfeet Nation. I don't know why they would, but there you go. The U.S. government would treat that as an act of war upon the United States, and they would jump in to defend them. Determination of land boundaries, setting what belongs to the tribe, what no longer belongs to the tribe. The tribes agree to recognize U.S. authority in certain matters. Hunting and fishing rights, these can include lands that are not actually a part of the reservation, but that tribal members have access to, and maybe more than one tribe has access to, that are then protected by the federal government. Can also include guarantees of healthcare, education, agricultural assistance, housing, economic development, etc. These are the things that a lot of people think of when they go, "Well, damn tribes get all the money from the federal government." Well, again, part of a treaty. And again, it's not everything that a tribe needs to survive, typically. So, oftentimes, the relationship between the federal government and tribes is known as a federal trust responsibility, where the federal government is engaged in carrying out the promises that they made in these treaties, and also that these lands that the federal government is managing are held in a trust for all of the people of the tribe, not just for individuals in the tribe, but everybody in the tribe. Um, so these treaty promises protect sovereignty and self-governments, lands, assets, resources. These include property protection and land preservation and self-government. The title to these lands is held, again, in trust for the benefit of the tribe as a whole. So, in terms of relationship with the states, tribes only have the relationships with the states that they really want to have. So, there are certain circumstances under which, say, the state of Montana and the governments of these reservations and of these tribes will agree to work together on certain issues. Um, Drug enforcement tends to be one of those issues, like trying to stop the meth trade and all of that. I believe most, if not all, of the tribes here in the state have agreements with the state government to aid in that effort and share resources in that effort. Um, but tribes are free to create laws that are more stringent than state laws. So there are things that you can do here in Great Falls that if you go up to Rocky Boy or go over to Browning, that's not okay in those places. I can't think of an example right now, but there are certainly those things. Or the tribes can create laws that are more lax. One of the ones that came to my mind the other day was fireworks sales. There are some tribes that allow the sale of fireworks pretty much year round on the reservation, and so a lot of folks will drive up to the reservation to buy fireworks and bring them back. Um, and they'll allow fireworks that maybe otherwise, even like on the 4th, wouldn't be allowed to be sold here locally. The big boomers and whatnot. I don't know fireworks that well, but I think what M80s. I don't think you can really get those legally here in town, even around the 4th. You can get them, I think, on some of the reservations. I'm not sure which ones. But the states and the tribes can collaborate on issues of mutual concern. Like I said, meth is a big one where a lot of the tribes will cooperate with state officials, and also there's state and federal cooperation. So really all of these levels of government and various governments are cooperating together to try and rid us of the scourge of meth. Um, so either by individual agreements or what are known as compacts between the tribal governments and the state that basically say, okay, we're going to work together on these issues. And then in terms of relationship with the federal government, again, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is sort of the federal government representative, if you will, presence on most Native American reservations. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is a part of the U.S. Department of the Interior, which, by the way, for the first time in history, is led by an American Indian person. Her name is Deb Haaland. Haaland, and she was actually just on Late Night with Seth Meyers the other night. It was a very interesting interview. But yeah, so she is the first American Indian person, woman, man, what have you, to serve in the president's cabinet in any form whatsoever. Here in Montana, we have only had one statewide Native American elected official, and that was Denise Juneau, who was the superintendent of public instruction, basically the top official in charge of schools for 8 years. And she left office, 5 years ago, something like that. So, yeah. But the Bureau of Indian Affairs was created in 1824 as a part of the U.S. Department of Interior. Oh, and here's the map that I promised to show you. This is available. You can search Montana Indian Reservation map, and you can find this. It's in your book. It's any number of places. But if you want to look at this, I will say a version of this map, basically with the names removed, is what you're going to see on the final exam. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Please note that the little shell, it just has a star because they're headquartered in Great Falls. They don't have a reservation. So there you go. Again, you can Google this, Google image search. You could find this easily. And then just the last thing I wanted to mention is that here in Montana and actually across the country, a number of these reservations and tribes do have tribal colleges. They tend to function as sort of a community college sort of model, typically focusing on like 2-year degrees. That being said, a number of these institutions are transitioning to 4-year programs in some areas, including Salish Kootenai College which just started a year or two ago, a 4-year program in nursing. You can actually get a bachelor's in nursing from Salish Kootenai College, which is led, by the by the former director of Indian education for the Great Falls Public Schools. Her name is Sandra Boham, and she is the president of Salish Kootenai College. So just another little link in the chain there. But all of the state's reservations do have some form of tribal college. Again, most of them are more of a community college 2-year degree sort of institution, but you do have institutions like Salish Kootenai that do offer some 4-year programs, and a lot of them have programs where you can go from a 2-year program at a tribal college to a full 4-year program at like U of M or MSU Billings or one of those type of places. So those are available. All right, so that was the last thing I wanted to mention to you. Are there any questions about anything we talked about today? And I know that was fast and dirty and very short on specifics, and I'm sorry about that. But that's Native American law and government in general is very short on specifics.
Question? At what point is it that the federal government can step in?
And again, that is highly dependent upon the reservations. Some reservations have a more flushed out legal system where they handle more of that stuff than the federal government does. Some of them, really only are equipped to deal with speeding tickets and things like that, and so the BIA is more involved. So really, it honestly depends upon which reservation and which tribe is being dealt with. And I know that's a highly unsatisfying answer. I went to a class in Missoula a couple years back, and one of our topics was Native American legal systems. And the guy started out by saying, realize that this is all just general and no two tribes are alike, so we have really no specifics on this. And I mean, there are people that get like master's degrees in navigating this stuff. So, yeah.
Wow, you'd think that in the treaties or the contracts between the federal government and the tribes that there'd have to be some kind of standardized form.
Well, but I mean, if you think back to when, remember, they stopped doing treaties in 1871. So prior to that, I mean, think about how many changes the government went through. So, I mean, it would depend if it was negotiated under one president, the terms were one way. If it was under another president, the terms were a different way. And that was until we hit the 20th century, there wasn't a lot of, carrying through federal decision making from administration to administration, regardless of what party was controlling it. So, I mean, this is a function of just various different presidents and political parties and how they felt about tribes at that time. So, you'd like to think, and I think if they could go back and renegotiate everything, it would all be sort of standardized, but nobody's really keen to do that either. The tribes don't want to possibly give away something that they have, so they're not wanting to go back and reopen these things up, and the federal government's not really willing to make new treaties. And that for the tribes, that's not okay either. They want that legal protection that a treaty affords them. So, yeah,
So then, are there certain things that you can, let's say, get away with on a tribe, in tribal government that you can't in standard government?
Well, I mean, like, there are certain tribes that are more lenient in terms of, like, drug use and things like that. Speed limits can be a little different. I mean, they can pass the laws that they really want to pass, and for the most part, especially nowadays, the federal government, it's kind of like the states that pass marijuana legalization. For the most part, the federal government isn't going to try and Bigfoot those states too bad, because if they do it to one, they're going to have to do it to all of them. There's a growing number of states that are not in conjunction with the federal government on like marijuana legalization, Montana being now one of those states. It's highly unlikely that the federal government would have the resources to try and enforce federal law when it comes to, who smokes a doobie. And it's the same
Yeah.
with reservations. The BIA has limited resources, and they're not going to really overstep tribal authority unless they're called upon to do so in so for some tribes, if it's like a murder, then yeah, that's a BIA thing and it goes to federal court and all of that. Some tribes handle that themselves. So yeah.
So then, can someone require or request, I believe, sanction in a reservation?
So okay, so can somebody request to be tried by
Like,
the federal government as opposed to by
no, I guess that's not what I'm saying. Can you request, it's like protection. I can't think of the word at this
like
moment.
okay, like sanctuary?
Yeah, sanctuary. Can you
Let's say
request sanctuary?
you commit a crime and then you flee to the reservation.
Yeah.
Again, again, it depends on the tribe. Some of them have agreements with the federal government that they're going to extradite those people. Especially if you're a tribal member, it's a little easier to maybe try and hide out on a reservation. But especially here in Montana, a lot of the tribes have agreements with the state government that, yeah, hey, we're looking for this person. We think they killed 5 people. We think they headed into your reservation.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they're going to be found and they're going to be turned over.
Yeah.
So I mean, is it technically a possibility? Sure. I would say if you're, say, a white guy that commits a crime and heads for the reservation, you're probably not going to be all that safe.
No. Especially depending on what one you go to.
If you're going to do that, you're better off, trying to go overseas to some place that doesn't have an extradition treaty with you.
Yeah.
But again, that presents its own challenges. So anyway, now that we've concluded this
interesting
crime and get away with it seminar, any other questions before we shuffle off? I should tell you your journal topic for the week. How are tribal governments often similar to the U.S. government, and in what ways do they differ? Again, in a nutshell, generally, knowing that every tribe's a little different. Yeah, this is one of those topics that, we could be in master's level discussions about. So that's your journal topic. So, any other questions? All right, if there's nothing else, you can be free. And if you have something you want to talk to me about, hang out. We'll talk about it.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording. All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.